I'm Susan Yawkey with VOA's Middle East Monitor. Coming up, we hear from two experts on the crisis in Syria. Suspicions are heightened that Eritrea is arming Somali militants. Turkey is considering its options in ending a violent insurgency. And Muslim American children take a mock pilgrimage to Mecca.
We teach them all the steps, the historical significance, the background story, everything that goes with it.
It's all ahead on The Voice of America. The French news agency AFP and Reuters are reporting that Syria has accepted an Arab League plan to end nearly 8 months of bloodshed. The statement was made during a ministerial meeting at the organization's headquarters in Cairo. AFP quoted an Arab League official as saying that the Syrian delegation informed the ministerial meeting that Syria accepts the plan without reservations. The United Nations says the number of people killed in the 7-month-old uprising in Syria has surpassed 3,000. The Syrian government says terrorists have killed hundreds of security personnel during that period. To give some insight into the events in Syria, my colleague David Hutchins and I spoke with two experts. Robert Powell, senior Middle East analyst with the Economist's Intelligence Unit in New York, and Joshua Landis, author of the authoritative Syria Comment blog and director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. We asked if the international community has failed in Syria. First, Mr. Powell.
What more could they have done? If people are talking about wading in the same way NATO did in Libya, then that would probably have been hugely counterproductive. And it is in the center of a volatile region with, among others, Turkey, Lebanon, Iraq on its borders, and it could have become very bloody, very messy, very quickly. So it's difficult to know entirely what could be done. Equally, the opposition are not absolutely united on this. So if you ask different opposition people, they'll be for or against sanctions. There's no single line on that either. So it's a pretty tough nut to crack, if truth be told.
We saw in our reporting a few weeks ago people holding up placards actually asking for intervention. Clearly, there was an oil equation. Gaddafi wasn't very popular, and the international force was mobilized quite quickly. And after 7 months, we had regime change in conjunction with the rebels. But NATO is basically saying we're not going to be involved with Syria at all. A, is this a double standard? And B, do you think those protesters actually would like some sort of international intervention?
Well, let me jump in here as Joshua. Of course there is a double standard. Syria, though, is a country of 23 million with deep ethnic and confessional splits. Libya is a country of 6 million people where half of the country, Benghazi, had already split away and formed an opposition that was beginning to get united. And there were massive defections from foreign ministry throughout all the ministries of the government. It looked like Gaddafi's support was crumbling, which it was, and that the country would quickly change regime on its own. So when the NATO jumped in to provide a little bit of a protective zone, they thought that they were going to be doing something for a few weeks. This process was well in hand, and they would be in and out. Now, it turned out to be much more complicated than they originally thought, but not, they were right on the whole. They had to bomb a lot more than they thought, 30-something thousand people killed, and it did it. And I think all of them, were wiping their brow and taking a big sigh of relief that, in fact, he fell when he did and that they could get out of there. But it made them, I think, a little bit anxious. They don't want to get into Syria. Syria is a big country. And there is no Benghazi. The army has stayed loyal, by and large. There's been a lot of little defections at the lower ranks from the Sunnis. But the big difference is that the Alawites, who are 12% of the regime, the Christians, who are another 10%, have stayed loyal. And the upper ranks of the military are dominated by Alawites. They are going to fight for Assad. They have retained control of the country and the military. For anybody to say this is analogous to Libya is crazy. It's a much, much bigger operation. So, yes, there is, technically, people are being hypocritical by not bombing Syria. But the analogies really come up very short when you look at what actually has to be done. There's some very heavy lifting for the Syrians. And I think everybody's saying, you first, you first. Now everybody's looking at Turkey, and they want Turkey to sort of go to war against Syria, but without NATO or American help. And clearly there's a lot more jockeying that has to go on here.
Joshua Landis with the University of Oklahoma, and Robert Powell with the Economist Intelligence Unit in New York. To hear the entire interview, listen to our new podcast starting Thursday. Just Google VOA Middle East Voices on Facebook.
If you're a news junkie and crave the latest news and analysis about the Middle East, follow us on our new and improved Twitter feed, VOA Middle East Wire. You'll find us on Twitter at VOA Middle East. Every day, we tweet VOA's own special reports, analysis, VIP interviews, and podcasts. Plus, you'll get the latest buzz from VOA's entire Middle East producers and correspondents. VOA Middle East on Twitter. Get a read on the news before it happens.
The Kenyan military said 2 planes landed at an al-Shabaab-controlled airfield in Somalia this week, loaded with arms destined for the al-Qaeda-linked group. The news immediately heightened long-standing suspicions that Eritrea is arming Somali militants. VOA East Africa correspondent Gabe Joselo has details from Nairobi.
The Kenyan military did not say where the airplanes came from, but that they landed in the south-central town of Baidoa, an al-Shabaab stronghold, and that they were carrying weapons for the militant group. Local media reports were quick to pin the shipment on Eritrea, which has long been accused of supplying al-Shabaab. The Eritrean Foreign Ministry issued a statement Wednesday denying the accusations, calling them pure fabrications and outright lies. It also accused its regional rival Ethiopia of being the chief author of a disinformation campaign aimed at discrediting Eritrea. But Rashid Abdi, an analyst with the International Crisis Group, says Eritrea has a history of supplying militants in Somalia.
I think no one doubts that Eritrea has, throughout the last 4 years, been supportive of al-Shabaab, sending in weapons, sending in trainers, and also training hundreds of al-Shabaab fighters in some of its military camps. But as I said, it's very difficult to confirm this news story that this support has been resumed by Eritrea.
A United Nations report released in July alleged Eritrea had flown weapons and fighters into Somalia on numerous occasions. The report also said Eritrea has been funneling about $80,000 per month to people linked to al-Shabaab through the Eritrean embassy in Nairobi. Eritrea has consistently denied the accusations. Why fund al-Shabaab? Rashid Abdi says it is all about Ethiopia.
Eritrea definitely has been supportive of al-Shabaab for a long time, and this support is not ideological. It's essentially meant to really counter Ethiopia's influence in Somalia. And during the Ethiopian occupation, that was the height of Eritrea's involvement in Somalia.
Eritrea and Ethiopia fought an intense border war between 1998 and 2000, and tensions have remained high ever since. Analysts say this prompted Eritrea's alleged support of al-Shabaab during Ethiopia's invasion of Somalia in 2006. Now, Kenyan troops are pursuing al-Shabaab in Somalia in a cross-border operation that began nearly 3 weeks ago. Kenya blames the militants for a spate of recent kidnappings and attacks and has vowed to continue fighting until the threat is eliminated and Kenyans can feel secure. This week, a spokesperson for the Kenyan army warned of impending military strikes on al-Shabaab targets across Somalia, including Baidoa, Afmado, and the port town of Kismayo. Gabe Joselo, VOA News, Nairobi.
We invite you to join in with your views at our online poll. This week we ask about UNESCO admitting Palestine as a full member into the UN group. You can cast your vote at voanews.com/ME and discuss the issue on Facebook on our Middle East Voices page. Turkey's recent military operations against the Kurdish rebel PKK is the latest step in Ankara's battle against the terrorist group, which has bases in neighboring northern Iraq. It reportedly was one of the largest in the past decade. Thousands of soldiers, backed by tanks and helicopters, spent a week tracking down rebels, who killed 24 soldiers and led a series of cross-border raids earlier this month. The PKK has been battling the Turkish state for greater minority rights and local autonomy since 1984. Metehan Demir, who reports on defense issues for the Turkish newspaper Hürriyet, says that, like the previous 30 or so military operations since the 1990s, the latest military response will have limited effects. He says Turkey is considering the idea of creating a buffer zone in Iraq to prevent future rebel incursions, but there are problems with this idea.
Turkey has been thinking this solution for a long time, but it's not that easy for Turkey to establishing a buffer zone because Iraqi administration will not accept that as well. If you look at today's condition, even they don't even accept Turkey's current cross-border operation. Also behind the scenes, U.S. will not allow Turkey to establish a buffer zone.
Controlling mountain passes on the Iraqi side of the border has long been seen as the only way of curtailing PKK insurgents entering Turkey from their bases in Iraq. Turkey has had a military presence in the Iraqi border region for more than a decade, but observers say that expanding that presence and establishing a buffer zone will meet with resistance from the semi-autonomous Iraqi Kurdish administration, which controls the region. Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said last week that Ankara's patience was running out.
Kuzey Irak yönetimi kendisi engellemelidir. Ya bizimle işbirliği yapmalıdır.
He said the regional administration in the north of Iraq should either prevent the terrorist structure or cooperate with Turkey, or Turkish forces will enter and stop them themselves. He said that is a right that stems from international law. Turkey's increasingly strong stance against the PKK rebel threat is backed by Washington. Former Brigadier General Haldun Solmutürk, a veteran of previous Iraqi incursions, says Ankara would only have attempted such an operation with tacit U.S. support.
Now we understand that there is a common understanding reached by both sides, Turks and Americans, on which such operations could be conducted.
U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton condemned the recent attacks by the PKK and expressed the United States' continued cooperation with Turkey to combat violent extremism. Washington offered no criticism of Turkey's latest operations, despite increasing concern from Baghdad and the local Iraqi Kurdish leadership. The presidents of Pakistan and Afghanistan have been holding their sixth trilateral summit with their Turkish counterpart in Istanbul. The meeting between the Pakistani and Afghan leaders is the first since the assassination of Afghanistan's former president and chief peace negotiator, Burhanuddin Rabbani, for which Kabul holds Islamabad responsible.
Resolving the ongoing Afghan-Pakistani tensions over the assassination of former President Rabbani was a key issue during the day of talks hosted by Turkish President Abdullah Gül. During a press conference with Presidents Asif Ali Zardari of Pakistan and Hamid Karzai of Afghanistan, Mr. Gül said a breakthrough had been achieved.
Bugünkü zirvenin en önemli neticelerinden biri de Yüksek Barış Konseyi Başkanı.
He said Pakistan and Afghanistan have reached an important agreement. He said that they have agreed to cooperate on contributing to the national investigation regarding the assassination of Mr. Rabbani. President Gül said the investigation will be coordinated by the two countries' foreign ministries and will involve their intelligence services. Mr. Rabbani, who was seeking to negotiate with the Taliban to end their insurgency, was assassinated by a suicide bomber. His killing has been the latest source of deep distrust in the already difficult relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan. President Karzai has accused the Pakistani intelligence service, the ISI, of being involved in the assassination, a charge Islamabad has denied. Mr. Karzai welcomed the agreement.
And I hope that the mechanism that we have established for pursuing the matter of the assassination of President Rabbani with success will lead us to more fruitful and in-depth continuation of talks between Afghanistan and Pakistan, inshallah, into the future.
The Afghan president has recently been increasingly vocal in charging that the ISI is giving support to the Taliban insurgency, a charge Islamabad also strongly denies. But in another step to defuse tensions, the head of the two countries' armed forces and intelligence services also held talks in Istanbul, along with their Turkish counterparts. Reducing bilateral tensions is seen as key to improving regional stability and ensuring Afghanistan's future. On Wednesday, Afghanistan and Pakistan will participate in a regional foreign ministers' summit on development and aid, again hosted by Turkey. Observers say creating a political momentum in relations between the two countries is important ahead of international meetings on Afghanistan set to take place in Bonn, Germany this December and in the US city of Chicago next year. Dorian Jones, VOA News, Istanbul, Turkey.
Prosecutors presented photographs Tuesday in the court-martial of U.S. Army soldier Calvin Gibbs. They say show he had a direct hand in alleged atrocities against Afghan civilians last year. VOA Pentagon correspondent Luis Ramirez reports from Joint Base Lewis McChord in the U.S. state of Washington.
Tuesday was the second day of testimony in the court-martial of Calvin Gibbs. The 26-year-old staff sergeant faces 3 counts of murder in addition to 13 other charges. He faces life in prison without parole if convicted. Gibbs, a former squad leader, is accused of masterminding and leading his platoon to carry out the killings of unarmed Afghan villagers in Kandahar province and staging them to appear like combat deaths. His attorney argues that Gibbs was betrayed by his comrades, who he alleges acted by their own will. On the stand for a second day was Chief Prosecution Witness Jeremy Morlock, once Gibbs' right-hand man in the platoon that Gibbs headed. He testified that Gibbs spotted a victim at random, tossed a grenade, ordered Morlock and another soldier to shoot the man, then himself shot the man to make sure he was dead. Morlock said Gibbs then planted a hand grenade next to the Afghan victim to make it appear that the man had tried to attack the U.S. soldiers. Gibbs' attorney denied his client shot the man, then called Morlock's testimony into question by casting doubt on Morlock's accounts of where the man had been shot. Prosecutors then presented a photo of the man's corpse shot in the back of the head, as Morlock had testified. Tuesday's testimony included more gory accounts of the atrocities allegedly committed by Gibbs, with the 5 members of the military panel trying the case being shown photos of bloody and mutilated corpses and severed fingers. Among the other witnesses who testified Tuesday was Alexander Christie, a medic with Gibbs' platoon, who described seeing Gibbs hunch over the corpse of an Afghan teenager and using a pair of shears cut off the boy's finger as a keepsake. The medic said Gibbs taunted him for refusing to do the amputation. He described yet another disturbing scene of Gibbs playing with the boy's body, moving its arms and mouth like a puppet. At the end of the day, there was testimony from another platoon member who described how Gibbs led him and others to beat a soldier who they suspected was telling on them. The witness said Gibbs tried to intimidate the soldier by rolling out 2 severed fingers and threatening to kill him if he informed anyone of what the platoon was doing. The case is alleged to be the worst atrocity committed by U.S. troops in the Afghan conflict. 9 platoon members have either pleaded guilty or been convicted, and 2 others are awaiting courts-martial. No senior commanders above Gibbs have been tried or disciplined in the case. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State.
This year's Human Development Report warns environmental degradation threatens global progress for the poor. It says inaction on climate change and habitat destruction is jeopardizing health and the pursuit of higher income in developing countries. Lisa Schlein has details from Geneva.
The 2011 Human Development Report warns development progress in the world's poorest countries could be halted or even reversed by mid-century because of environmental degradation. It says this can be stopped if bold steps are taken now to slow climate change, prevent further environmental damage, and reduce deep inequalities within and among nations. The report notes both developing and developed countries have made significant progress in human development since 1980, but it argues many of these gains will be lost if environmental deterioration goes unchecked. Lead author of the report, Jenny Klugman, tells VOA nations in sub-Saharan Africa are at particular risk.
The main problems that we see in sub-Saharan Africa are around land degradation and desertification, which are affecting livelihoods of many millions of people, obviously in rural areas. We also see some problems, or kind of significant problems around access to water and safe sanitation in both rural and urban areas.
The report says half of all malnutrition in sub-Saharan Africa is caused by environmental factors. It says environmental degradation is expected to cut agricultural productivity and cause food prices to soar by up to 50% in the coming decades. It says environmental deterioration could undermine decades of efforts to expand water, sanitation, and access to electricity to the world's poorest communities. While drought in sub-Saharan Africa is of concern, the authors say sea level rises in low-lying nations in South Asia and the Pacific will put more than 100 million people at risk in the decades ahead. A key feature of the report is its Human Development Index, which ranks countries on their achievements in health, education, and income. This year, Norway, Australia, and the Netherlands top the rankings of 187 countries, while the Democratic Republic of Congo, Niger, and Burundi are at the bottom. Klugman draws a comparison between the best and worst achieving countries.
For example, life expectancy in Democratic Republic of Congo is 48 years for someone born today, whereas if they were born in Norway, it'd be 81 years. So it's a huge difference. And if you go to each of the components of the index, so for example, the average number of years that you would expect a child to go to school in Norway is nearly 13. If they're in DRC, it's only 3.5 years. So it's just stark differences.
The United States, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, Liechtenstein, Germany, and Sweden round out the top 10 countries in the 2011 Human Development Index. The 10 countries that place last in the rankings are all in sub-Saharan Africa. Lisa Schlein for VOA News, Geneva.
More than 1.5 million Muslims from around the world have gathered in Mecca for the Hajj, the annual pilgrimage, which begins later this week. At a Washington area mosque, American Muslim children learn about this pillar of their faith in a fun way. VOA's Jerome Sokolowski reports.
Come on, you guys say it. Labbaik Allah. Labbaik Allah.
Hafsa Abdul Rahman leads the children of the Dar al-Hijra Weekend School into a mock-up of the Muslim holy city, Mecca. They circle the Kaaba shrine, they do it again, and again, and again. It's just the first part of a multi-stage ritual that in real life takes 5 to 6 days to complete.
We take them through every step, just as if their parents actually come also, because they get a chance to learn about the steps. And we teach them all the steps, the historical significance, the background story, everything that goes with it.
You're going to start in Safa, you're going to walk to Marwa, and you're going to come back, and you're going to do it 7 times.
Hafsa went on a true Hajj as a teenager.
And I can really say that it changed my life, completely changed my life. Here in the U.S., you know, being a Muslim and being covered you're a minority. But for the first time, when you are in Hajj, you're surrounded by thousands of men and women from all over the world that are dressed like you, and you no longer feel like an outsider.
The children have spent several weekends in this Islamic school on projects like this to recreate Mecca in this mosque, so their excitement is perhaps understandable.
And so I think it's really important for them to get a chance to see it here. And hopefully, from these activities, we'll build a love within them that they will strive, they'll save up the money, you know, they'll do everything that it takes so that they actually do end up performing the Hajj.
And no doubt they will take with them sweet memories of their first make-believe Hajj. Jerome Sokolowski, VOA News, Falls Church, Virginia.
This has been VOA's Middle East Monitor. Join us Monday through Friday for news from the region and of interest to the region. Coming up on International Edition, UNICEF takes on Zimbabwe's failing healthcare system. Thanks for tuning in to the Voice of America.
For more on the stories you've heard on our radio programs, visit our website at voanews.com. That's where you'll find in-depth reports, related stories, videos, and more from our team of correspondents. Or take the news with you by downloading podcasts of your favorite VOA program. That's at voanews.com.
voanews.com.
Online news for a changing world.